I don't believe it now. Like when I put some research more on it, I was like, I don't know what I'm arguing
So
for.
my topic is about the effect of artificial sweeteners. So there are many types of artificial sweeteners, such as aspartame, sucralose, and butane and saccharines. And all the artificial sweeteners have a benefit in weight reductions and also for diabetes patients. Consuming artificial sweeteners for all the time will have a negative effect on our health. So my major claim is artificial sweeteners have a negative effects on our health. So for my first supporting claim is that artificial sweeteners have been linked to effects the gut microbiome, which would lead to health problems such as glucose intolerance and the increased risk of diabetes. So according to a study by Nature, they stated that there is an association between the use of artificial sugars and metabolic disorder, and that might happen through the gut microbiome, which is the diverse of bacteria and in the human intestine. And since it affects gut microbial, consumption of artificial sweeteners leads to glucose intolerance and also increase the risk of diabetes due to microbial alterations. And there's also some study from Weizmann Institute of Science, and the researchers were doing some experiments with mice. The scientists found that mice that consume artificial sweeteners also cause significant changes to the microorganisms in the gut, which cause the body to develop glucose intolerance. And also, in order to find out whether humans also have an effect in glucose intolerance for consuming the artificial sweeteners, the researcher examined data from 7 people, and the result shows that 4 of the 7 people had a significant decrease in glucose intolerance, in the glucose tolerance. Therefore, it shows that consuming artificial sweeteners would lead to glucose intolerance. And for my second supporting claim, artificial sweeteners such as sucralose, aspartame, saccharin, and are genetically modified and derived from dangerous chemical compounds, which is not safe for the consumer. It is not safe because genetically modified sweeteners made from corn, soy, and sugar beets and have been genetically altered to resist or produce harmful pesticides, which is also bad for our health. And since aspartame is made from genetically modified bacterial excretions such as E. coli, it also makes aspartame to cause some health problems. And according to the article from Healthy Life, Healthy Planet, aspartame is metabolized and breakdowns into things such as methanol, which then will be converted to formaldehyde. And it's the reason why it causes some health problems. And as for my third supporting claim, is that artificial sweeteners such as aspartame contain formaldehyde and amino acids such as aspartic acid and phenylalanine, and which could increase the risk of having brain damage. And according to a new review by scientists from University of Pretoria, consuming high doses of aspartame may inhibit the ability of enzyme in your brain to function normally, and it might be due to the formaldehyde since it has been known to cause brain damage. Also, since aspartame molecule is also made from aspartic acid and phenylalanine, it would cause sustained high blood levels, which can lead to brain damage. And according to Journal of Pharmacology by Dr. Kirtidan Tandul, there was a major concern to one of the 20,000 children who are born with phenylketonuria, which is an inherited condition, and these children cannot metabolize phenylalanine, therefore it leads to dangerous level in their brain. So in conclusion, artificial sweeteners have a negative effect for our health because it affects gut microbial communities, which could lead to glucose intolerance and increase the risk of diabetes. And also artificial sweeteners also contain some dangerous chemical compound and amino acids, which leads to brain damage. Therefore, artificial sweeteners is not safe for our health. Thank you.
All right, the topic is stated. I think it should be introduced in a more interesting way, but we know exactly what you're talking about. You make your claim and then you make it again. That's a little bit confusing, so I think you only want to make the proposition one time and then follow up with a preview of the supporting structure. You don't really have a preview of the supporting structure, at least not one that's very clear. Your label on the first point was not clear until maybe the second or the third time you started talking about the same issue. You were rushing a lot in the presentation. You had a minute and a half left at the end of the speech, so you don't need to rush quite as fast as you're going. And because you have kind of a quiet voice and there's a little bit of an articulation issue, that makes some of the things that you're saying harder to pick out, and the rushing makes it even more complicated. So that's a little bit problematic. You have to pace yourself a bit more effectively. In the body of the speech, I did see an organizational structure. There is some signposting that's going on, so that's helpful. At the end of the speech, the summary sounds like, I thought, oh, she's going to clarify it, summarize it, and really rescue the organizational structure, and I'm back to the situation. I can't tell if you have 2 supporting points or 4 supporting points. That's because everything is being rushed together there at the end. So I think you need to work on structuring this a little bit more, or delivering the structure in a way that is clearer and easier to follow. On the evidence that you present, there's a lot of conclusionary information that's being presented. There's some factual data that talks about what the contents of the artificial sweeteners are, but then there seems to be an automatic assumption that there's a danger, and the link, for instance, to brain issues, I think, is understandable. There's some connection here, but there's no statistical information that talks about what the risk is. There's no study that identifies a particular harm. These are just experts that say, well, these things are linked to that. My guess is half the things that we consume are linked to those sorts of things. Why is this an excessive risk or different? If this, in fact, creates glucose intolerance issues and contributes to diabetes, since we've had artificial sweeteners for a number of years, we ought to be able to have some statistical or longitudinal information that gives us proof of that particular point, and I don't see any of that being offered. I think there's probably information out there for that, and so that seems to be missing a little bit. I think you're trying to rely on some factual data from 1 or 2 studies in order to make the inference, and sometimes those studies seem a little bit thin. 3 out of 7 people had that reaction, or 4 out of 7 people. I'm not sure that that's a convincing piece of information by itself. It needs to be followed up by something a little bit more substantive. Let's see, and then there was, you mentioned this childhood illness that 1 in 20,000 kids gets, and I'm going, and how is that connected to this? That was not very clearly explained, and it seems to be sitting there. There's probably a piece of testimony in the source that you're citing, or maybe there's a theory that connects it to some of the issues that are supposed to result from the brain disease or the brain damage that you claim is occurring, or the blood issue that's going on. But I don't know. It just seems like it comes out of nowhere. It sits there, and suddenly that's an additional reason why we should be worried about these artificial sweeteners. And it sounded to me like it was a genetic disease, so I'm not exactly sure how an artificial sweetener creates a genetic disease. That doesn't make much sense. All right, thank you.